The air around the Coronado Naval Officers Club smelled of old wealth and sea salt, a sharp, clean contrast to the heavy, sickly sweet aroma of the cheap cigar smoke that clung to the outer security perimeter. It was the annual Founders Ball, the kind of event where generational loyalty mattered more than recent service stripes, and the brass shined with the reflected glory of old money and inherited prestige. Tonight the line stretched back 300 yards, MPs in pristine whites, forming a barrier between the eager, jostling junior officers hoping for a glimpse of power and the hallowed inner circle. But the real filtration happened not at the metal detectors, but at the mouth of the grand staircase, lit by massive antique sconces casting an oppressive yellowish glow. That was where Captain Marcus Thorne stood, a human monument to institutional arrogance, his dress uniform starched and pressed so precisely it looked molded from glass. He was the perfect gatekeeper, handsome, bored, and utterly convinced that the uniform he wore elevated him above the necessity of actual competence or situational awareness. He was bored until she arrived. She wasn't trying to cut the line. She was simply there, standing slightly apart, in the shadow of a colossal stone anchor monument. She wore simple dark blue jeans, worn soft by countless washes, practical boots that had seen more mileage than any staff car, and a jacket, a canvas field jacket, 3 sizes too big, zipped high against the evening chill. She carried only a worn leather satchel, slung across her chest, and held the hand of a small girl, perhaps 6 years old, shivering slightly despite the mild California night. The child, Lily, was clutching a faded plush dolphin. They looked like they were waiting for a taxi, not trying to breach a secured perimeter guarded by 2 platoons of armed MPs and every senior officer on the coast. Thorne clocked her instantly, not as a threat, but as an inconvenience. A misfiled piece of paperwork that needed shredding. He saw the denim, the lack of insignia, the tired line around her mouth, and categorized her. Dependent. E3 spouse looking for the commissary, confused by the event lighting. "Ma'am!" Thorne's voice was too loud, too smooth, calibrated for dismissal. He stepped down 1 polished marble step, his shadow lengthening aggressively. "This is a restricted zone. The dependent services entrance is 3 blocks east, near the motor pool. This area is for credentialed personnel only." The woman, Sam, didn't flinch. She simply shifted her weight, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement that spoke volumes to anyone who knew what to look for. The center of gravity dropping instantly, ready to stabilize or pivot. She smelled faintly of chlorine and old oil, the scent of a workshop, not a perfume counter. "We need to be admitted, Captain," Sam said. Her voice was low, flat, and entirely devoid of inflection. It was the voice of someone who understood that emotion was a vulnerability. Thorne let out a small, cultivated sigh. He glanced at the line of officers watching the exchange, enjoying the theater of superiority. He saw a lieutenant commander snicker behind his gloved hand. Thorne straightened his tie. "Listen, sweetheart," Thorne started, the condescension thick enough to chew on. "I appreciate that you might be dealing with logistical difficulties, but this is the Founders Ball. The security matrix is closed. Unless you have an Admirals endorsement or an F1 level clearance, you need to turn around. Now." He gestured dismissively toward the parking lot. Lily, exhausted by the cold and the noise, pulled on Sam's hand. Her small voice was a razor cutting the tension. "Daddy!" she whimpered, mistaking the parent in the dark uniform for the parent who should be in the dark uniform. "Daddy, they won't let us in." The sound of that vulnerable complaint, the small breach of composure, seemed to amuse Thorne further. He crouched slightly, leaning closer to Sam, invading her space, his breath smelling of mint and cheap power. "You see, even the child understands. This isn't your venue, technician. Take her home. Maybe tomorrow you can apply for an access permit through the proper channels." Sam's eyes, which had been tracking the subtle movements of the surrounding MPs, their breathing patterns, the slight shifts in their trigger fingers, locked onto Thorne. Her gaze wasn't angry. It was analytic, like a scanner assessing a structural flaw. "Captain," Sam said, her voice dropping a notch, becoming dangerously quiet, "I am not here for an application. I am here because I was told to be here. My access is necessary. It is pre-authorized. I suggest you check the manifest before you decide to impede a directive." Thorne scoffed. He hated being told to check the manifest by someone he had already filed under irrelevant. He reached into his polished leather portfolio and produced a heavy laminated card. This is the official guest list, ma'am. The only names cleared for this perimeter tonight are general staff and designated support personnel, all pre-vetted 6 months in advance. Your name is not here. Your file number is not here. You have 0 clearance. He tapped the card impatiently. Last chance. Move. Sam did not move. Instead, she reached into her satchel. Slowly, every millimeter of the movement was controlled, deliberate, maximizing the agonizing slow burn of the tension. She didn't produce a weapon. She produced a simple, matte black card, thinner than a credit card, lacking any discernible insignia, save for a single small silver relief embossed in the corner, a minimalist silhouette of a solitary peregrine falcon in mid-stoop. She didn't hand it to him. She held it between her thumb and index finger, barely an inch from his face. My designation is on the secondary, classified manifest, Sam whispered. The sound of her voice was like steel sliding on wet stone. It's coded under Sentry. I advise you to read the instructions regarding Sentry access protocols. The instructions explicitly state, immediate, unimpeded escort to control. Thorne's smile vanished. The casual sneer hardened into annoyance. He didn't like the word Sentry. It felt vaguely high level, too professional for the denim-clad parent standing before him. You're playing games, technician, Thorne growled, stepping closer, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. This was the moment of physical intimidation, the moment where the power differential was meant to enforce compliance. If you are Sentry, where is your detail? Where is your convoy? Sentry is a logistical code for high-value ordnance movements, not for dependents showing up unannounced. He made the critical mistake. He reached out, not violently, but with the patronizing intention of gripping her elbow and steering her firmly away from the gate. His hand never made contact. Sam moved faster than the eye could register, a blur of practiced efficiency. She didn't strike. She simply caught his wrist. It wasn't a grip of brute strength, but of exquisite anatomical precision. She found the nexus of nerves and tendons just above the watch strap. Thorne froze. The pain was immediate, sharp and paralyzing. A sudden white-hot spike that traveled straight up his arm and locked his shoulder. It wasn't enough to make him cry out, but it was enough to drain the color from his face and make his breath hitch. Sam tightened her grip marginally. Her face remained utterly placid, yet her eyes were now utterly lethal, burning with a cold clarity that stripped away the uniforms and the rank. "Captain," she said, even softer now, her mouth barely moving. "My convoy is currently dispersed across 3 continents, running live operations. My detail is currently observing the 6-foot radius around us. You assume I am logistics because that is what my cover states. You assume I am a dependent because you judge worth by the polish on my boots." She leaned in, her eyes flicking rapidly over the golden sheen of his shoulder boards, dismissing the weight of his rank with a single contemptuous glance. "You need to step back now, Captain. If I have to explain what Nightjar Protocol Phase Delta means to you, we are already past the point of salvageable deniability. I am here for the extraction, and for her." She glanced down at Lily, who was oblivious to the micro-war being fought above her head, still clinging to the dolphin. "You think I risked 5 layers of deep cover security and violated protocol by coming here personally because I wanted a free dinner?" Sam's voice was a low, chilling rasp. "I am here because for her safety, for the safety of everything I was forced to abandon, this base, this secured perimeter, is the only sanctuary left on the planet, and you, Captain, are in the way." Thorne was sweating, not just from the pain radiating from his wrist, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that the woman gripping him was not a disgruntled dependent. He felt the minute, razor-sharp edges of 3 ancient, barely healed scars tracing the back of her hand. Scars that spoke of deep, sustained chemical contact, perhaps from handling specific, classified composite weaponry, or corrosive compounds used in explosive disassembly. He tried to pull his arm back. Sam's grip held firm. "Release me, technician," he hissed, his polished facade beginning to crack. "I am Sentry," Sam corrected him. "And no, I will release you when you are no longer a threat to the integrity of this mission. Call control, immediately. Ask them to confirm the priority designation. Orpheus Gambit. That name. That designation." It wasn't in any briefing book Thorne had ever seen, yet the sound of it resonated with a primal, chilling authority. It was a phantom name, a designation whispered only in the deepest, secure channels, usually associated with operations that redefined the concept of existential threat. As Thorne struggled internally, his arrogance battling a rising tide of ice-cold fear, the impossible happened. The massive carved mahogany doors to the main ballroom, which had been tightly secured and silent, suddenly burst inward, not with a rush of music or conversation, but with a palpable wave of absolute panic. A figure emerged first, Admiral Theodore Vance, commander of the entire Pacific Fleet, a man whose 4 stars and service ribbons were usually carried with the slow, measured gravity of a war monument. But Admiral Vance was not measured now. He was running. His usually immaculate uniform was slightly askew. He was followed by 4 other senior officers, a phalanx of generational power. General Harding, Army Special Ops Liaison, Vice Admiral Choi, Head of Naval Intelligence, and 2 other senior naval commanders. Their faces were masks of horrified urgency. They didn't look at the line of queuing officers. They didn't look at the baffled MPs. Their entire focus was a single point outside the velvet rope. Captain Thorne, still trapped in Sam's precise nerve-pinching grip, watched in stunned, slow motion as Admiral Vance, a man who commanded carriers, skipped the final marble steps, almost stumbling in his haste. Vance saw the scene. Thorne's hand trapped, Sam's field jacket and her small daughter clutching the dolphin. The Admiral didn't hesitate. He didn't question. He didn't stop to assess. He slammed directly into Captain Thorne, pushing the officer violently aside with a shocking lack of formality, treating the uniformed gatekeeper like a misplaced piece of furniture. Thorne staggered backward, the pain in his wrist forgotten in the face of the fleet commander's physical intervention. He hit the railing with a grunt, his hat falling onto the marble floor with a hollow clack. Admiral Vance didn't spare Thorne a single glance. His entire body pivoted instantly toward Sam. The 5 officers, the men who controlled thousands of lives and billions in assets, stopped dead silent, forming a half-circle around the woman in the faded denim jacket and the small girl. The transition from arrogant dismissal to absolute deference was a blinding, instantaneous flash. Admiral Vance raised his hand, not in a greeting, but in a salute. A sharp, perfect, full palm-to-brow military salute, the kind reserved for the highest echelons of command, executed with the desperation of a man who realized he had just averted a geopolitical catastrophe by seconds. His voice, usually booming and confident, dropped to a horrified, worshipful whisper that carried terrifyingly clearly through the sudden, echoing silence of the entrance hall. "Commander Santos," Vance breathed, his jaw tight with panic. "Ma'am, my apologies. My deepest, most profound apologies. We only just received the Priority 1 confirmation from JSOC. They confirmed your designation and the activation of Orpheus Gambit 5 minutes ago. We had no idea you were already in the perimeter." He visibly fought for composure, the stars on his shoulder boards seeming to tremble. "Where is your support team, Commander? We had a secure extraction team staged 40 clicks out, awaiting your signal. We thought you were still compromised." Sam, Sergeant Santos, the technician, the dependent, finally released Captain Thorne's wrist. She didn't rub her own hand. She simply adjusted the strap of her satchel, the movement casual, almost lazy. Thorne watched, pale and shaking, unable to move from where he was wedged against the railing. Sam looked past the Admiral, her gaze sweeping over the polished shoes of the 4 generals and admirals standing rigidly at attention. She saw their anxiety, their absolute naked fear of having offended her. She looked down at her daughter, Lily, who was now rubbing her sleepy eyes. "The support team is redundant, Admiral," Sam stated, her flat voice now holding the unmistakable weight of someone who ran operations, not paperwork. "I had to ensure the transfer personally. The information security breach was too severe. I couldn't trust an outsourced asset with Lily's protection or the embedded payload." She lowered her voice, bringing her gaze back to Admiral Vance. "I am Sentry. My priority isn't the mission anymore, Admiral. My priority is this child. I came through the outer perimeter with a 6-year-old on my hip, wearing a jacket that hasn't been cleaned since the last deployment. Your security, your Captain Thorne, barely registered my presence. That, Admiral, is the embedded payload." The silence in the grand entrance was deafening. Every officer in the queue, every MP, Captain Thorne, all were paralyzed, watching 5 of the highest-ranking officers in the Western Hemisphere being reprimanded by a woman who looked like she shopped exclusively at thrift stores. General Harding, his face stricken, took a quick, halting step forward. Commander, we have the penthouse suite prepared, under secure, non-transferable designation. It's shielded, secured, and there are 3 teams of Tier 1 protective detail already deployed. Unarmed, ma'am. Just perimeter visibility. Anything you need, anything at all. The entire base is yours. Sam nodded slowly, accepting the deference as her due, not her favor. She reached down and gently adjusted the small plush dolphin in Lily's hand. Good, she said, her expression softening only marginally when she looked at her daughter. She finally looked directly at Captain Thorne, who tried desperately to look professional, but only managed to look nauseated. Captain Thorne, Sam said, using his rank as a judgment, you failed your primary directive tonight. The goal of this gate is to identify and filter threats. You filtered an asset based on superficial appearance and outdated uniform regulations. Your assumption of superiority almost compromised an entire operation. She didn't wait for his apology or his response. She simply turned to Admiral Vance. Admiral, she instructed, the transition to operational tempo seamless. I need secure comms to Joint Command within the hour, and I need a change of clothes for my daughter and me. Something appropriate for the venue. We're late for the ball. Vance moved instantly, gesturing with frantic urgency to the rest of his command staff. Clear the way! Escort Commander Santos and her daughter to the inner perimeter. Full, silent escort. Captain Thorne, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Report to my office at 600, and bring a lawyer. Vance personally moved to Sam's side, his massive frame suddenly dwarfed by the quiet authority radiating off the woman. He gently placed a hand on the small of her back, a gesture of respect and guidance, not possession. The procession began. 5 admirals and generals, their brass gleaming under the oppressive yellow light, formed a tight, protective perimeter around the woman in the field jacket and the small girl with the dolphin. They walked slowly, with immense dignity, disappearing through the mahogany doors, leaving the silence of the entrance hall ringing with the profound, devastating echo of shattered hierarchy. Captain Thorne remained leaning against the railing, his body rigid, staring at the spot where the simple black card with the peregrine symbol had hovered inches from his face. He finally bent down, retrieved his hat, and placed it back on his head. It felt heavy. It felt meaningless. He had been judged, not by his superiors, but by the sheer, unassailable weight of operational capability. He learned, in that terrible, chilling moment, that the people who truly run the world don't need shiny buttons or polished ranks. They move in the shadows. They wear camouflage, and sometimes they just look like a tired, single parent trying to protect their child. Respect is not given by rank. It is earned by blood, silence, and the knowledge that you are the only one capable of holding the line. If you believe respect is earned by blood and not by rank, type respect in the comments.